Hi everyone, and welcome to our online conversation on adapting the public space for the future. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks to the Architecture Foundation for hosting the event. And thanks a lot to the amazing speakers that have kindly accepted to be with us today. I'm Giorgia Scognamiglio, the James Walk London City Organizer. And I'm here with Franca Karasai and Diana Dobrin, the other two girls part of the team. James Walk London is part of a global movement and that aims at reconnecting the people with their environment and with each other through free citizen-led working conversations that promote dialogue around any topics related to the city. The official festival usually takes place the first weekend of May, but of course, due to the current situation, it has been moved online globally. And here in London, we have had to quickly adapt, and we organized a monthly long program of digital works, online workshops and talks with different urban actors. And we have started to notice how changes are, how our cities are changing, and that for a lot of people around the world, actually the neighborhood where they live actually matters even more. And especially now that cities are preparing for the recovery phase, a lot of the debate has been around the public space. And there is the need to adapt these public spaces, and cities around the world have started to experiment some changes with temporary measures. And of course, especially here in London, we have noticed that residents, policymakers, local authorities have started to work on these changes. The debate, we understand that the debate is quite wide, and we could look at the public space from different angles, and we as James Walk London have more questions than answers, and that's why we are really excited to have here with us four amazing guests that have all been involved in some works to adapt our cities in different ways, and we are happy to hear from them their experience, and try to think about what is it that we want to maintain of this, that from the most temporary interventions to what is to others, and what is the kind of future that we want for our cities. So without me talking too much, just a few housekeeping notes. The speakers are going to speak for around 40 minutes. We, Franca, Diana and I are going to start the debate with a few questions, but of course we will open the discussion to all of you. So please leave any comments in the chat box, and Diana and Franca will let me collect them. Yeah, I'm going to introduce our speakers one by one. The first speaker is going to be Demetrio Scopelliti, who is the advisor to the Deputy Mayor for Urban Planning, Green Areas and Agriculture at the City of Milan. As you might have noticed, the City of Milan has been in the spotlight for the amazing work that they have started in the public space to make the City of Milan more for cycling and walking. And Demetrio has been working as the advisor to the Deputy Mayor since 2016, being involved in complex projects, policies. He has started to work on Piazze Aperte, open squares. That is a program that started before this the pandemic, and is now involved in Strade Aperte. Welcome, Demetrio. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Nothing. I'm going to present you what's our program concerning strategies, action, and tools for cycling and walking in the City of Milan. that was conceived actually during the pandemic. So when it was clear and was starting being clear that we had to face distancing measures as part of our new urban life, but we did it starting from a perspective that we were already building in our program in our city, thanks to a series of planning measures that basically starts from the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, so a plan concerning sustainable mobility, go through the urban planning regulation tools that we have conceived for the next decades, 2030, and also some other implementation plan that we were working on concerning improving our air quality and our climate. We were basically planning the future, as many cities do, but then, as all the other cities, but actually even before the other cities, we had this, we entered into the lockdown phase, and we entered into the pandemic phase, and it was just like out of the blue, completely unexpected, one day from another one. And we had to actually change our approach and starting working no more for the future, but for the present. And actually, we did it considering a document which is called Milan 2020 Adaptation Strategy, which is about, let's say, defining new phases and new normality, starting from what we experienced during the lockdown, the containment phase, etc., etc., with a series of assumptions and with a new vision that was actually, let's say, anticipating the vision that we were planning for the next decades into the immediate present. Of course, inside this strategy, there are a series of contents that are related to walking and cycling. Particularly, the idea that the city had for the new normal, for the new normality, is to work on changing the demand for mobility, try to redistribute it into the time frame of the day, and also working on a shorter distance city. So we work, as Paris is doing, on the idea of a 15 minutes walking cities that actually could shorten the distances for any citizen to go and to have their services provided. And of course, we have to rethink infrastructure, urban spaces, and public services for the new reality. We consider a plan which includes a long list of contents, which of course relates to many different aspects, but one of the main ones is of course mobility, because mobility was one of the most affected by the pandemic and the crisis. We, generally speaking, we have a wider mobility strategy, which, as I said at the beginning, is trying to reduce travel and diversify mobility options within the cities, promoting, of course, smart working as a new normality somehow approach and standard, in order to modify city schedules, identifying distance systems to allow public transport to work even with safety distancing. And of course, one of the main approach that we had was trying to promote as much as possible active mobility as an alternative to the public transportation, because the public transportation had to be, let's say, constrained by distances measures, as in many cities, like probably like in yours. At the same time, we had also to manage how to behave with the private transport, because of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, private transport was just like the immediate reaction as a possible alternative to the public one. But then we worked on the idea that we had to create a proper program, to try to generate more space for other uses, like of course pedestrians and cyclists, to work as an alternative for the public transport. And we worked particularly on an axis of the city, which was one of the most important in terms of underground line. So why we did this, and why we take advantage somehow of the pandemic to do this kind of approach? Because basically, we have the great opportunity in this phase to encourage active mobility, because the traffic was shut down, and actually it's something that will never happen again, hopefully, in such an incredible way, because we had to face the social and physical distancing measures that the pandemic reclaimed, and also because the health crisis is an opportunity to make the streets healthier and our cities healthier for the future. And to do that, we have to go back and consider them at a human scale. And thus we basically defined a series of light, cost-effective, and faster reversible alternatives to start implementing during the pandemic, in order to take advantage of this moment, which was also with less resistance to change by all the stakeholders for various reasons, particularly for the health reasons. We did somehow something that is like what the Netherlands did in the 70s, where during the energetic crisis, actually the citizens reclaimed for more spaces for alternative uses and not just cars in the streets. And of course, we know very well what happened in the Netherlands after that moment. We also took as a list of examples that were already popping up in the world, like Bogota, that basically extended the ciclovia context idea to their everyday context, but also to some projects in other cities that were already planned and implemented before the pandemic, like the Superillas in Barcelona. And also, we took advantage from our own experience for the Piazza Aperte program that we launched in 2018, which was basically, which is a program, a tactical urbanism program to change the street space into public space. This is an example of the before and after that we did last year in a neighborhood of Milan. And as you can see by this picture, there is also a series of bike lanes implemented in this public space project. So we started from this experience, and hopefully we will be back soon to live in those spaces in this way, in order to redefine the use of roads and public spaces to change the way we move. And we did it with a series of interventions. The first is planning new emergency bike lanes. This is actually the most visible activity that we did, but it's not the only one. So we launched a program for 35 new kilometers of new cycle lanes by the end of the year, 22 of them by the summer, and also, but was not the only part of the program, because also we tried to generate the fact that walking should be at the heart of urban life, by slowing the speed of the streets in different neighborhoods, and also by enhancing public space in neighborhoods by activating a series of implementations, like not just bike lanes, but also pedestrian areas, also reducing the speed in certain streets in order to allow terraces, bike cafe and bars to pop up instead of parking spots. We try to define the concept of shared street in some of our more narrow streets, etc., etc. So we work on a public space program, wider public space program, in order to redefine the public space from a series of intersections and street design, conceiving the fact that we should move cars, to the fact that we should create spaces for people, where basically we could restart on our activities of going to a restaurant, attending an event, or moving in a different way, and not just by cars. In order to do that, we did a series of trial cases and experimentations. Of course, we started with the most simple ones, which is painting bike lanes in the streets, but also by using, let's say, other alternatives like parking lane, protected bike lanes, some parts with bike lanes with dividers. Of course, we try to use our experience on speed control measures by design, together with this tactical urbanism program. We are launching a program, and actually probably this week will be approved the first set of shared streets, where basically we give priority to pedestrian streets in order to slow down the speed and define shared space, and also by extending sidewalks by our interventions, but also including the fact that also the shop owners could apply for a program to put their parklets in the streets instead of not just on the sidewalks, but also instead of parking spots. And also they can gather together and collect proposals for pedestrian areas. And this week, just this week, we are going to approve the first 7 pedestrian space reclaimed by the shop business owner and the business owners. And then we are also trying to experiment some bike boxes or other things that actually were not approvable yet in Italy. So we are also pushing on the regulation level in order to try to innovate. And the government actually followed us and our idea and our concept by also giving incentives to Italian people to get a bike lane, to get a new bike if they will live in a city. So basically, we launched a program which takes together a significant part of the city, putting together what we were already doing and new projects in order to share, to define a new concept, a new idea of the street in the city. We call the program Open Streets, in order to start with some implementation of the first bike lanes in Corso Venezia, actually by reducing and changing completely the timing of our implementation from years to days, which is something that changed much the potential of what you can do in a city. This is the first images of the first start straight of bike lane. Actually, they were published everywhere. I never thought it would be so easy that a project made by just painting lanes could be so popular. But this is very impactful in terms also of how we're changing our approach to city. The programming conceived bike lanes, but also pedestrian areas on side of it in order to extend the sidewalks. And some part of it is protected by scooters, etc., etc. And what we saw from the immediate moment we started painting, that actually we had much more bikers and riders than what we had before the pandemic. That was impressive, and was not just a perception, but this is also demonstrated by data. We are collecting data in the first kilometers of bike lanes that we are doing in Milan, and we saw from the first data that immediately after the lockdown already, bike use in some streets was even higher than car use in a certain time of the day. And then we are continuing working on Corso Buenos Aires, which is one of the main shopping streets in Milan. I don't tell you how big the reaction is from the opponents. If you're Italian, actually, you find this bike lane on the newspaper every day for whatever reason. But the fact is that actually they work. They work very well, and it's easy to change the street, and it's easy to change the way we approach the street and we use it. And that actually these pictures are the demonstration that we should do it with more determination for the future. I continue with some pictures and that's it. I'm of course available for any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Demetrio. Thanks a lot. It's great to see how things are progressing in Milan. You're a few weeks ahead, I think, compared to London. So it's good to see that these experiments are actually bringing some positive results, and it's good to see that you're already trying to collect data, because I think the difficulties are also around understanding the change of the behavior of the residents and trying to respond to what people want in such a short time. So it's great, and it's great to see. I mean, also here in London, it has been great to see how local authorities have actually jumped in trying to adapt and make the streets for pedestrians, and that's why we are really happy to have here the next speaker, Joel de Mowbray, that is the Brixton Liveable Neighbourhood Program Lead at London Borough of Lambeth. So Joel, yeah, are you there? Perfect. Thanks a lot for coming. I don't think we can hear you. Can
Hey
you?
everybody, can
Yes,
you hear me now?
yes, yes.
Grand.
Thanks. Hi.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I hope everyone's doing well wherever you are. My plan for this little talk is to try and bish bash bosh through as many kind of usable little nuggets that you might be able to apply to whatever location you might have in mind. So my name's Mowbray. I'm a officer at Lambeth Council. For those of you that aren't from London, there's 32, 33 if you include City of London, different boroughs. Lambeth is one of them. We're kind of in the south of London, southwest London, and I particularly work on Brixton. What I'm going to be focusing on is some practical steps that I hope you can take just to make it as efficient as possible, because for most of us, we've got a very, very narrow window to work with and a lot of sensitivities at play. So we set out a strategy from the get-go. I think we were the first local authority in the UK to put one out there. Behind the scenes, all of that's online. There's a link there if anyone's interested or like thinks they might be able to use that for their authority, go for it. Behind the scenes, what you might not have seen is how we used our kind of division of labour to be able to do things much more quickly. And now we set up kind of a weekly timetable that allows us just to like hammer through schemes at a rate kind of unparalleled to how we would before. Because obviously everyone's under pressure to deliver a lot more quickly. And so we had to change the way we do things. I'll say a bit more about that. Also, if there are any engineers or designers in the audience, you'll appreciate that all of those decision points cumulatively really slow a project down. So what we work to do is agree some design principles with the emergency services and with our engineering and highways colleagues, so that we knew the materials we were going to use and we knew the layout that emergency services were going to require, so that we're not going to get any kickback or any of those issues that delay street changes if you haven't thought it through ahead of time. And then finally, right now, I'm sure many of you already are aware just how like civically minded people are right now, in a way beyond kind of what I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so I'll say a little bit about how we want to work with people and the community to kind of use that civic mindedness, use the time and capacity that people have these days so that we can do more than we normally would. So this is just an example of our kind of weekly timetable. So we have our kind of senior management thing first thing on Monday morning, and literally a clockwork through our week to get everything out so that we churn out one quite major project every single week. In terms of what we're delivering, some of you might be familiar with concepts like the super blocks or low traffic neighborhoods. Essentially what we're doing is removing through traffic from large areas to create very walkable neighborhoods, equally good for cycling. In terms of our design principles and materials, just using things that we can move, that we can adapt, and that try to enhance the aesthetic of the area, as opposed to just kind of, you know, classic like red and white highway, that kind of look. So coming on to public engagement, as I said, we've got a hugely civically minded position right now in the time of life that we're in. And also across Lambeth, we've got an incredibly skilled population. No doubt there'll be people from Lambeth on this call that have engineering design skills and might not be as busy or just might be a bit more civically minded than they normally would. And so we've got people coming out of the woodwork from all sorts of different areas and neighborhoods offering to help. And so what we're doing is working out how we can pair local professionals that want to contribute to enhancing their area with local people that want to see change, so that whilst we implement temporary changes like you're seeing here, they're able to band together and say, well, you know what, this could be improved, or you know what, how about if we did it like this in future? Because the way that we work is to implement these changes on an 18-month temporary basis. So working with the community is about kind of how can we tweak it over the first 6 weeks to make sure that we pick up those kind of niggles that maybe if we had more time to consult would have come out of the woodwork. And then the other side of it is like, what do you want this to be in 18 months time? And by bringing the community together, you haven't got that situation where you've got like council officers or a design team that is massively overstretched, and you wind up compromising on the outcomes that you can get because for some reason we create bottlenecks for ourselves. Within this, when we do kind of reduce through traffic, as the last speaker said as well, we create great opportunities to support local businesses to spill out. So here's an example that we're introducing around Railton Road. What we're doing to this street, you can see its typical function is parking and two-way traffic. What we're doing is removing through traffic, so it'll just be one single decker bus that comes every now and then. With all of the space that is no longer needed for all of that through traffic, even these small neighbourhood local businesses will get more space that we're going to try and allow them to use flexibly. Because, you know, we could say, this is for you to put your tables out, and they'd say, what about our loading? Or we could say, here's some space for you to load, and they say, well, we need to spill out. So, you know, ultimately what we're trying to do is create space that they can use. It's in their business interest to use it in a way that's considerate of people. So, you know, I think this is a situation where what we can try and do is allow people to navigate these things for themselves with guidance, support and resources from us. In terms of looking at town centres a bit more specifically, because what I was talking about there really was kind of residential neighbourhood areas. Town centres are going to be a bit more complex, you know, space a lot more constrained, a lot higher footfall, a lot more expensive property within those areas in terms of the rents of those businesses. So particularly in London, across London, especially in Lambeth, especially in Brixton, we're not going to be able to find enough space to support all of them without closing some roads. And we are really fortunate in Lambeth to have basically a business improvement district. For those that don't know, that's a collection of businesses that are members of an organisation that's kind of like a mini council, basically, that exists to provide extra support to businesses that kind of falls through the gaps of what the council might offer. So we're going to work with them in a coordinated way to try and develop ways that they can apply to create street space for businesses on a regular basis. So we're not coming into this prescriptive. We're not coming to say, you can only do it weekends, you can only do it evenings. You know, ultimately, it's in their interests, just like with the loading situation, to use their common sense about what local people are going to get behind and how local people are going to want to use the town centre. And frankly, they know it better than most of us. So, you know, let's leave it to the experts in that respect. But what councils, city, municipalities, whatever organisation it is, really, I think what we're there for is to enable and to process and to support them to get what they need out of this situation. So there's loads of ways we can do it, but I'm just going to focus on temporary road closures because it's time's limited, and that's one that I think I might have a gem for you. So as I said, allowing an application process for bids. So the way that we're trying to go about this is to look into our archives. Every time there's been street works or a burst water main or gas works or Network Rail are doing this or any kind of street closure, when that happened in the past, they put an application in to the council with a management plan that showed how they were going to manage people's movement around that, and the council agreed it. So for every town centre, I'm sure if you think back to that place that you might have in mind, which brings you here today, no doubt it's had waterworks or, you know, it's had some kind of event or temporary management. There ain't a place that hasn't really. And so, my main tip there is just to go back or contact the person that manages these and see what they've got in the archives. Because whilst no one will probably look back on that experience of those waterworks and think, yeah, I want a bit more of that, it is something that you've got in the back pocket, and if it serves a business function, it's a bit of a different story. If anyone is interested in applying that, you're going to come across some challenges, especially if you're in the UK, because it doesn't fit with your general event management approach, because it's not a one-off event, it's a regular thing. It's not a street market really, because you're supporting existing businesses that have their own shops to spill out and create space. So it's not really a market or street trading. And it's not a street party or a play street or a car free day, because you can't really do those, especially in the UK, more than 4 or 5 times a year without applying to the Secretary of State for permission to do it. So it doesn't really fit within any of the existing things that people are used to doing if you're going to do it on a regular ongoing basis. So the way that we're looking to do it is under a temporary traffic management order that enables them to close the road when they need to, and to develop behind the scenes at the moment, working with our licensing colleagues to understand how we license that space. But I think there'd be a temptation in local authorities to try and do all of this yourself. You know, really bids from the conversations we've had, they really want to take it on themselves because they know everything will pan out a lot quicker if we play to our strengths, and it's in their interests. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'm about. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks a lot, Joel. It's great to see how you are progressing in Lambeth, and it's true that you have been one of the first actually starting with these temporary changes. And I particularly appreciated what you were saying about the local authority being an enabler of these changes, and your collaborative approach with residents and anyone that is interested in helping in these projects. And I think this is why we are super happy to have here with us the tactical urbanistas, I would say the Banksy of the tactical urbanism, a self-organized group of women that has been formed in April 2020 to implement tactical interventions across London. They have started in Hackney, actually creating more space outside supermarket, and they're continuing with their tactical interventions. So welcome to the Tactical Urbanistas.
Hello, thank you. There's 2 of us here tonight.
Oh, great.
Let me share my screen. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are a group of friends who we work in the built environment in various capacities, and it started back in April. So we were feeling frustrated seeing people unable to properly socially distance on narrow pavements, on streets. This example photo here, narrow pavements, lots of parking, people trying to queue to get into shops. And we wanted to create more space for people and try and reclaim some of the space that's been taken up by cars. So how we do this, we spend a lot of time looking at like appropriate locations, looking at places where it's needed, where the pavement's very narrow, where there's more people trying to queue for shops and get past the queues, somewhere where there is the space to take from the carriageway, so somewhere that's maybe got parking next to it, or somewhere where, like, one of the sites that we did was a space that had double yellows next to the loading bay, and there was lots of extra carriageway there, so we weren't going to get in the way of the road, but there was space to take. And then we come up with a design and decide what we're going to do. We need to source materials, so when we put in planters, we've used tires for these, and we've just sourced these for free. So we like phone up local garages and see what we can get, and then we've bought the paint and the plants ourselves, and then we just go out really early in the morning and put out these planters and paint stuff before people wake up for the day. So this was our first intervention, which was my local Tesco, and this was a space that had a really narrow pavement, big queues, and this big, huge, wide road, and there wasn't any parking next to it. The loading bay was slightly further up, And so we figured we could take the same width as the loading bay and without like eating in any further into the carriageway. And yeah, we painted these colourful circles and made these tire planters. And we also put up signage like explaining what we were doing and that it was for people to use for walking and social distancing. And we also had a few lessons learned from this first one. So one of those was not to use oil-based paint, which we used on the tires and takes a lot longer to dry than we realized. So that was one of the first lessons learned. And also from this, we found the shop manager really liked it, and so we wanted to work more with the shops next time going forward. So I'll pass on to other tactical Urbanistas to talk about this one.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So I'm just going to talk about the other interventions that we've done since then. So this second one is outside my local bike shop in Hackney Wick, which is why I've got that really great aerial view without using a drone. And I'm sure others of you have noticed that during this time there have been lots of people queuing on narrow pavements outside bike shops and other shops, which is exacerbated also by the fact that only 1 or 2 customers can enter a shop at a time. So I went to my bike shop and I just chatted to them about potentially creating a bit more space for people to queue outside the shop. And they thought by taking over the one car parking space right outside the shop. And they thought it was a great idea. So just very quickly built a makeshift planter made from wood that we found in the local area, and seized the opportunity to take the space. So you can see it being used here on a weekend afternoon, and it went down really well. Again, put some signage up to explain to people what the intervention was for, and the shop and customers seemed to receive it really well. In fact, one of the other shops asked if we could do it outside their shop as well, so that was really great to hear. The next intervention after this one, the next 2 interventions after this one, we went back to Hackney, and we were sort of looking a little bit more at where the council had already widened pavements to create some more space for people, but we noticed that people were still seeming to be quite reluctant to step into the carriageway and use the newly widened footway, which is kind of like a fascinating insight in itself into the psychology of how people are using these widened spaces and whether they're using them at all. So we decided to use some stencils and paint, things like space for all, as you can see in the pictures, to encourage more people to step into the newly widened space, which was for them to use to effectively socially distance. But yeah, this intervention was more to kind of highlight the council's effort to put in this kind of a temporary intervention. And then for our latest intervention, we kind of went back to taking back the space, and we went to Islington just over a week ago and did this intervention on Essex Road, which is a bit more similar to number 2, and it was outside a co-op again. So here we wanted to, again, there's quite, as you can see, that's like an on-road sort of pavement parking situation. And we wanted to take that space using the tyre planters that you see there, to create some more space for people to queue and effectively socially distance. And I think I just love the picture on the left where you can see a child using a space where a car would usually be. And our kind of I guess our token colourful paint situation, which we really love doing because it really brightens up the space. And we had so many people. We spoke to the co-op beforehand and went back a few times afterwards, and they were saying how many people had asked them if they'd had some involvement in it and how great it was. So that was just, we had some really positive feedback for this one. So just to wrap up, a short note on what we as a group would really like to see in the future, and some of this has already been touched on. It was really great to hear Joel talking about some of the temporary stuff that's happening in Lambeth, but we would love to see all councils acting bolder and faster in prioritising people over cars to facilitate social distancing and just generally creating more space for people. conveying the value in making these temporary changes permanent. So yeah, working with local communities to think about like what these temporary changes could look like in the future. In engaging with local people to identify spaces like where you know there are really narrow pavements that need, and I know a lot of local groups and councils are already doing this stuff, which is really great. Supporting residents and groups wanting to do similar things on their streets. I mean that feels sort of like the most important one for us. So we've had so many individuals and organizations reach out to us on social media asking about the practicalities and logistics for them to be able to do this in their own neighborhoods without feeling worried about potential repercussions. And it's really exciting for us. It's really exciting to see this appetite for residents to truly take like ownership of their own streets. And we'd love to see some kind of framework or funding in place for people to be able to do that in partnership with their councils. So yeah, that's kind of all from us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your amazing experience. Yeah, I've been to a webinar recently where people were saying that we need more color in our streets, and I think it's true. And I really appreciate that through your interventions, you have been actually talking with businesses and trying to respond to immediate needs from residents. So bridging that gap that there is usually so with people and residents. So thank you. We have been seeing a lot of interventions around walking and cycling, but we are also interested in seeing how the public space can be designed to actually make people interact again while physically and distancing. And we have here with us Athlyn Cathcart-Keays, engagement lead for Street Space and writer and researcher focused on all things urban and community resilience. Thanks, Athlyn. She will be sharing her experience, which is a bit different. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Let me just share this. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm the engagement lead at Street Space, who are a social enterprise embarking in Dagenham. We work with local people to reimagine their streets and spaces. Today I'm going to be talking about a very small project that I've been working on during lockdown to facilitate offline engagement and community interaction. So I lead the engagement on a low emission neighbourhood project in Becontree Heath, which is an area of Dagenham, colloquially known as the Fiddlers, for a pub that stood on the site where that garage is. The idea of the project is to make spaces greener, make it safer to move around by bike or on foot, and also to create and enhance public spaces. So pre-lockdown, we'd spent around 6 months engaging with different groups in spaces around the area, indoor and out, often hosting events outside to show how community spaces like that green that you see in the car park in the right corner could be used for community benefit. We'd also been supporting residents to take ownership of these spaces, and we're in the early stages of planning things like small festivals and school streets, street parties, as well as working with some of the local schools to make the space outside them safer. So in early March, I'd been planning with some residents to put up some notice boards in the area that would act as a way of communicating some of the design ideas we had, a way of sharing local information, and also acting as a meeting point for buggy walks and bike rides and things we had planned. But after a very badly timed trip to northern Italy, I was self-isolating at my parents' house in Nottingham, and obviously unable to meet with residents in Dagenham. So I decided to prototype some of these ideas and come up with a different way of working together. So though the UK hadn't gone into lockdown yet, things were very much moving onto a digital sphere. And I was slightly wary of trying to move all of the work online and communicate with residents in a digital way, because then we're missing large parts of the population who don't have access to platforms. And Netflix and Zoom doesn't really fill the void left by kind of public space and impromptu social engagement. So we wanted to use more physical ways of creating social connection at a safe distance. So rather than waiting until I returned to Dagenham to make the notice board, I saw that a neighbour across the street had these pallets outside their house, which you can see in the middle here. So I decided to make a prototype for outside my parents' house and made a kind of how-to video, which I then shared with residents to encourage them to do the same. And as well as information sharing offline, we wanted to encourage sociable distances and engagement with physical space. I found that even without coronavirus, people tend to go for walks in the area of Dagenham. They just go to parks or meet with people they know. So the idea was to install several notice boards in areas where residents had identified the need for invigorating public space. So like that green in the car park or dead pavement space around the area at large junctions. So with indoor environments not really serving as spaces where people from different households could interact, there's a need to create kind of urban living rooms and other outdoor meeting points where people can gather at a safe distance. So I think as well as opening up streets for cyclists and pedestrians, it's really important to create new ways of connecting and coming together. The board very quickly became a space where people could bump into each other while out. First thing I pinned up on it was actually a note just to say, here is information about the local mutual aid group, join a WhatsApp, yada yada. But unlike a standard council notice board, which is often kind of covered with plastic and a one-way information sharing tool, the idea here was that people could add to it as they wished. So it kind of became a space for asynchronous connection where people were having conversations or sharing ideas and thoughts without being in the same place at the same time. You can see on the right that lots of personal notes were left. There was poetry, running routes, song requests for the pianist across the road, and colouring books and things like that. So obviously there's a huge power imbalance in using only online engagement, and as our work in Dagenham really deals with invigorating public space, setting up something on the street was a way of bridging the divide between the two, and acting as an informal information tool and an opportunity for engagement. My work in Dagenham was very much face-to-face. I was just around the corner and I could drop by for a chat. So when we were unable to meet in the area, we really wanted to continue something to engage with people. Of course, I recognise that creating a how-to video that was then shared online doesn't quite fit the kind of analogue bill, but we found that we were able to engage with people on platforms like WhatsApp and our social media channels, and they were willing to share their addresses with us. And we did other things like send out seed packs and craft ideas, which they would then grow at home. And we were then encouraging them to kind of make seed bombs and do some guerrilla gardening in the area. We also acknowledged the need to put a pause on engaging on our designs and street changes at the time, when people were in, potentially stressful and uncertain situations. So rather than the notice board be a way of us engaging with people on our designs, it was a way for people to connect with each other. In terms of other kind of offline ways of invigorating public space, there are some examples that have been flying around that I've really enjoyed, like this. There's a local woman in Bristol who has been creating small beaches around seaside named roads. Someone's been writing the names of trees on the ground. In the middle is a parklet which has socially distanced seating on it, and there's outdoor galleries and other seating examples as well. So, as I said, Greening the Fiddlers is about making streets and spaces greener and cleaner and more welcoming. And the changes brought about by the virus, for example, the lack of cars, wildlife in bloom, and more people walking and cycling, it really presented an opportunity for us to listen to residents about what they notice in the area with these changes, and also what their issues and priorities are for their neighbourhoods, and also how to work together so we can weave those ideas back into the fabric of the neighbourhood when we return to Becontree Heath. So in terms of the notice board in Nottingham, after a couple of weeks of it being up, a local resident launched a design competition to encourage people to design a permanent version, something that could be a permanent fixture in the community. But a couple of weeks later, after the community had kind of regularly been coming together and meeting on the street, they realised that it had served its purpose. And so last weekend they gathered together and everyone brought a different tool and they removed it, although it does look like my dad's doing most of the work there. So local residents commented that they'd lived in the neighbourhood for years but rarely met with their neighbours, and there was clearly such an appetite for this. So it was really nice to see how it worked in Nottingham. As for the Greening the Fiddlers project, it's actually recently been put on hold due to funding, but we're still exploring ways to get people to engage with their surroundings and community offline. And while the answers, while this might have worked for Nottingham, it doesn't necessarily work for Dagenham, but it's low cost interventions like these, I think, really give the pave the way for testing things out and kind of planting the seed for longer term interventions in an area that could be bigger. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Athlyn. And yeah, I agree that the context is always important, but it's good to see how all the different approaches have a few things in common that are really important. So it's great to see how it's the perfect time to make more space for people and actually do it together with a collaboration between different actors. And that's why we are happy to have heard from all of you and seen all these approaches from all of you. We have seen a few common points maybe from the local authorities, even if it's the Italian point of view or more the Joel's perspective, but I was interested in seeing how the regulations for the first time are actually responding really quickly to immediate needs, and it's great to see that for the first time we are not so I mean, we need to do it, and then all the other things can be resolved in order to make spaces for people. We don't have much time left, unfortunately. Rosie, tell us if we have a few more minutes. I think I have one big question for all of you, and I mean, it's how can we think behind the emergency measures and use our observations to inform the longer term evolution of cities? Because now it's amazing to see all these experiments, and I really believe that I've always followed all the tactical urbanism interventions as a perfect way to test and also to measure the behavior of people. But how can we be sure that, how can we think about the future and make sure that this new configuration will become maybe permanent features of the city? Who wants to respond to that?
I'll do the city part, and I think one of the most important thing is showing that it works. Showing that there is an alternative that is possible and it's not so easy to, it's not so difficult to achieve. I mean, for instance, concerning our situation here in Milan, most of the experimentation that we did, and we actually tried it on some of the most important streets of the street, so we're very visible. We couldn't defend them without saying, come on, go to the streets and see how many people is using this. So, and also showing data demonstrating that actually it's needed. 25%, more than 25% of the people commuting in these streets we implemented the bike lanes are bikers now. So really deserve that to have 1/10 of the space. So it's actually something that it's easy to explain, even if it's not so easy in reality. So bring data and insist and show that it works. And I think it will be very difficult to take out something that works. Our experience in tactical urbanism is that it can be criticized, it can be debated and actually negotiated a lot, but it's very difficult to take out a public space that works. It can be improved, but it's difficult to go back. And so the most difficult part is always to make the first step. And once you did it, I shouldn't say it's done, but it's almost done.
Anyone else wants to share?
Yeah, I'd say just enhancing and enabling a sense of local pride in what's going on. So creating space for the kind of things that Athlyn and Tactical Urbanistas are doing, so that when all this is said and done, they want, you know, it's them telling us what they want, not the other way around.
And how do you see this collaboration going forward? Like, yeah, is there a way, because as Demetrio was saying, it's true that we have to measure and collect data, and sometimes it's too difficult from, I mean, the point of view of the local authorities, because we are not there. And as I was saying, I really appreciated that the Tactical Urbanistas, for example, just went and asked to the business owner. So do you see a way to make this collaboration more permanent maybe in the future?
Yeah, totally. I mean, all of us that work on the project are local as well. So, you know, we bob around, same as everybody else. We chat to the businesses, work with local people, etc. And then other than that, it's like WhatsApp groups. You know, you get so many residents on a WhatsApp group. And so, yeah, that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I think also it's incredibly important to think of this as a long-term thing and not just something that we're dealing with now. And it's okay to make mistakes. And I think like some of the kind of low-cost interventions are really important to just be able to test something. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You can try something else, but to really make sure that that's rooted in the local context, and you can involve people in the like participatory process and work iteratively to see what will work for that community at a given time. And if it's sustainable, then that's great.
I agree. Diana, Franca, do you have any other questions? I mean, yeah, I agree with that the collaboration is the key, and also because when it's the time for tactical urbanism interventions, you also have to see the response from people. So yeah, it's amazing to see the experience and how people are responding, for example, to the community board or the interventions in Hackney and Islington. And I wonder how we will make sure that, for example, because we are talking about local authorities where this is already happened, and I appreciated that these projects were like built in a framework like in a previous strategy, and I wonder if this is the same for local authorities that were a bit behind on some projects, on working and on making more space for so if there are any advices, if we need to build like a strategy together with the first responses. I don't know, I've asked a lot of questions, but I'm trying just to think to you know, places where this is more difficult to be applied.
Yeah, the answer is steal as much as you possibly can. You know, like Milan's done great work. There's plenty going on in Lambeth. There's plenty going on in Hackney. The fact that there's so many people doing so many different things means there's plenty for them to steal in terms of how they want to go about it. There's precedent now as well. So in terms of how people feel it being a risk, or, you know, how's it going to land, there's precedent now. Like, it's all, at this stage, it's pretty much all been done in one place or another. You can always give an example. So the main thing that they're going to need to focus on, get one person to pull it together, stealing what they can off that's already out there, and get another person to just prioritize the locations that are most important to their neighborhoods.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are running out of time. Diana or Franca, do you have any questions for our guests?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to thank you everyone for contributing. I basically just wanted to kind of wrap up on like a positive note, what's your kind of main hope for cities in the future, I guess, based on everything and all of the kind of solidarity and great ideas that you've seen coming up after this this kind of whole emergency situation? What's like one thing that you kind of take as a hope in the future for better cities?
I hope them WhatsApp groups get put to good use after all this.
Anyone else who wants?
We would really like to have some sort of like blueprint for people to be able to do more of what we've been doing, where, you know, when people see an issue, because, you know, a lot of local authorities are really stretched, they have a lot that they're trying to deal with already, and if residents have the like skills and the resources, if there was some sort of process where you could like apply to the council and get permission to do that, with maybe a bit of support and guidance from them to make sure that they approve of it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, off the back of that as well, I think it's incredibly important to like promote a sense of agency within people, because it's very clear that this kind of community spirit that's come out of coronavirus has been there the whole time, but it's just taken something like this to kind of really knock that in people. So a lot of residents that I work with in Barking and Dagenham, when we give talk about different ideas of things we can do in this street, they say, well, why don't you should go and do that then. And we always say, well, no, this isn't about us doing it, it's about us doing it, you know, as a collective, as a group together. So my hope is that people will see that they do have more of an agency to act in their local area.
Demetrio, your final thought.
I think it's the relevant thing is also that we conceive this methodology as I'm representing the top down, but actually we stolen the methodology to the bottom up, and I think when in the middle between the two, when we work together, is when we do the best. So I really think we should try to build this relationship and try to make the cities and to make the top-down approach a facilitation for bottom-up implementations, and this is actually, I think, the long-term legacy that we should try to build for this methodology that was kind of that seemed to be a bit part of a restricted team, and now popped up as something needed for all the cities in the world immediately, like a bomb actually. But it's a long time. Most of us is working on it, and it's now time to work together from the two perspectives in order to facilitate the right spreading of these measures.
Can I say one more thing as well? Is for them in the UK, look up the Localism Act 2011 and the community right to bid, because legally communities have a right to bid to do these things on the local authority's behalf and get paid to do it. Check it out.
I like to end this conversation with this tip from Giorgia. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Rosie and the Architecture Foundation for today. We, as James Work London, we really value the importance of engaging more with people and make residents, give them the tools to actually being more active in their relationship with the city. So we think it's the perfect time, and we've seen this through the eyes of our speakers. So thanks a lot for your contributions. Thanks everyone for joining us.